So I'm State Representative Kate Lipper-Garabedian, and I'm really grateful to my guests who have come together tonight to talk about a really important issue during COVID-19, the issue of housing security. And so tonight we're going to go through a little bit of the different programs and resources that are available to residents throughout the Commonwealth. So let me start by just giving you a quick sense of the folks who are joining me on the panel. These are the real content experts. So I'm glad that Regine Crispin from the Metro Housing Boston will be here to talk a lot about her organization and the ways in which it supports residents with navigating a number of the housing resource programs that are available in the state. We'll also hear from Brendan Goodwin with the Department of Housing and Community Development. DHCD is part of the executive branch, and he will be speaking tonight about a new initiative, the Eviction Diversion initiative, that was stood up during COVID-19 to support renters. Dana LeWinter, who is one of my constituents, works at the Citizens Housing and Planning Association and will be able to provide a broad sense of what housing looks like today, the struggles that we're having and the challenges folks are facing, as well as some of these resources and programs that exist. And then Andrea Park from Massachusetts Law Reform Institute can speak about the legal protections that folks have currently, both at the federal and state level, and the ways in which they can reach out and get support if they are in the midst of a housing process or some sort of litigation or in the legal system. I should also say that I am currently in a formal session on the House floor, so I may need to step away at some point to take a vote or two. And if that happens, my aide Becca Bueno is also on the Zoom, so she is more than able to help facilitate this agenda that we have tonight. So let's turn to the topics that we're going to be talking through. So I've already teed up a little bit about why we decided to pull together this community conversation, and I will provide an overview of some of the legislation that has passed on Beacon Hill to attuned to the housing challenges that have been really challenged during COVID-19. And then we'll turn to the panel of experts who I've already introduced to talk about the overview of the need and different responses, the Eviction Diversion Initiative, housing consumer education centers, how they can assist with RAFT and direct assistance programs, and then legal protections and support. I know a number of attendees submitted questions in advance, and I expect that we'll really get to them largely through the organic nature of these presentations, but to the degree that some remain, we can also discuss them after the panelists provide their remarks. So just to tee things off, I'm been really concerned about the issue of housing during this time, including because my office has heard from a number of residents in the Middlesex, 32nd Middlesex district that I represent, who are struggling with concerns about finding stable housing and who are also unable or worried about meeting their rent and mortgage obligations. So housing has certainly been at the forefront of a lot of the discussions happening on Beacon Hill since I took office in March, right as the COVID-19 crisis and the pandemic really took hold in the state. So you all are probably familiar with some of the bills and then eventually laws that were enacted, but I thought it would be helpful just to go through a few of them. So first, in April, the House and Senate passed, put before the governor, and the governor signed a moratorium on evictions and foreclosures. That put a pause on evictions and foreclosures for residences, residential properties, as well as small businesses for their rent. It also put a hold on mortgage and foreclosure issues for owner-occupied residents. So that was really critical, and it was considered sort of a leader in state law across the country. That moratorium was extended once by the governor and then ended on October 17th. During that time that the moratorium was in place, we also passed a COVID-19 spending bill that was House 4808 in July that the governor signed. And it included an investment of $13.5 million for local housing authorities. And I know one of the registrants tonight is the executive director of the Malden Housing Authority. And so we're glad to have him with us. Then in July, the House took up an economic development bill that included a number of investments in housing related to affordable housing. So we put $50 million toward affordable housing located near transit, another $10 million for affordable housing to incorporate green and resilient building design. We increased the tax credits for the Housing Development Incentive Program by $20 million. And we increased an annual allocation of low-income housing tax credit by $20 million until 2026. Now, that economic development bill is currently being negotiated with a Senate bill. So there's a conference committee that's working through the differences, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to reach a compromise and get something to the governor's desk this session. At the time then that the eviction and foreclosure moratorium ended in October, the governor stood up the Eviction Diversion Initiative, which is funded through various funding streams, including some of that COVID-19 support money that the state legislature approved. And so we'll have a chance in a little bit to hear from Brendan a lot about that initiative, and that'll be really helpful, I think. Finally, as I mentioned, I'm currently in a formal session today over the fiscal year 2021 budget. And the House released its budget proposal at the end of last week, which is what we're debating over the course of this week. But you'll see that there is a strong commitment to supporting renters and the housing programs that support those who are housing insecure. So we propose a $50 million appropriation to the Residential Assistance for Family in Transition program. That's the RAFT program that we're going to talk about tonight. And combined with the CARES Act funding that we received from the federal government that we've purposed toward this program, that would bring the total allocation in fiscal year 21 to $150 million for the RAFT program. The House budget also would add a new program support, a new protection, for tenants who are in the process of applying for RAFT. So if there is an open and active RAFT application, our bill would say that, evictions would not be able to be executed. They could not proceed while a RAFT application is pending. Additionally, we put $135 million, which is a $25 million increase into a voucher program for low-income households, and a $5 million increase to $29 million for civil legal aid. And I know Andrea is going to talk a lot about legal supports. So in addition to that, there have been a number of very important housing amendments that have been proposed, some that would enhance the eligibility for the home base program, another that would put more money into an eviction diversion initiative fund, the initiative that Brendan will speak about. There's also a proposal to appropriate more money to the housing consumer education centers. And these are all amendments that I've been happy to co-sponsor, and we'll see how debate goes and if we're able to include some of that in the House language for the budget. Next week, the Senate will take up its own budget deliberation. Then the two chambers will come together to try to agree on a compromise bill that we will put to the governor for his consideration. So I think there's no doubt that there will be significant investment in the housing programs and tenant supports that I've discussed, and the question will just be about specific details. The last thing I'll say before turning it over to the content experts here is that thanks to them and others, I did put together a one-page resource on housing programs and supports during a COVID-19, and it's here. And you can see there's a URL there. You can access it at tinyurl.com/KLG-COVID-housing. We will continue to update that with information. If anyone who is attending has questions about it or thoughts about things that we could add, we certainly can do that. And you can find a number of resources that my office has developed on my webpage, which is kateforrep.com/COVID-19. So with that, I think we will now turn it over to our distinguished panelists to give a little bit of an introduction. Please feel free to tell us a little bit about yourselves and your role at your organization, and then get into the weeds with us so we can learn a little bit more about how to navigate some of these programs. And we really appreciate you being here tonight. So could I start with Dana to talk provide a little bit of context and overview? And I'll stop sharing my screen now so that you can share yours.
Thank you so much for having me and for this conversation. So I'm going to share my screen. Just give me a second to do that. So do folks want to give me a thumbs up that's showing? Great. Okay. So once again, thank you for having me. My name is Dana LeWinter. I am the Director of Municipal Engagement at CHAPA, or Citizens Housing and Planning Association. We are a statewide affordable housing advocacy organization. So we advocate for opportunity. Historically, a lot of our work has been at the state and federal level. My program, which is about 3 years old, has taken that work to really advocating for affordable housing at the local level as well. We work to expand access to housing through first-time homebuyer education, through monitoring of affordable housing developments. And we also work to develop the field, do trainings and research, and whatever we can do to build up support for affordable housing in Massachusetts. So I wanted to just really quickly set the stage. You're going to hear from some of my colleagues about the solutions and a lot of the strategies that we are working on to make sure that the housing crisis right now is addressed. But to set the stage, it is, as many of you know, anecdotally a big problem, but let's put some numbers to this. This is from a report from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. The link is at the bottom of my slide, but there's an estimated number of households that will have trouble covering their rent in Massachusetts of 45,000. Now, this was back in early October. The number will probably be updated soon, but it's a staggering number of households, and that number translates into about $40 million of that's needed to help them pay their rent monthly. And when we get to the conversation about eviction, now that the eviction moratorium in Massachusetts has expired, that's looking at about 60,000 renter households that fear eviction because they're already behind on their rent. So all of these programs and strategies that were in place, it's easy to get stuck on the numbers and the programs, but think about that, 60,000 families that we're talking about. These are people that are afraid and wondering what they're going to do. So all of these resources are really to help stabilize them, stabilize their property owners, and stabilize their communities. Again, Brendan is going to go into the Eviction Diversion Initiative, so I'm not going to say too much about that, but it's really critical that people just know what their resources are. And I really thank Rep. Lipper-Garabedian for putting materials out into the world that can help people navigate what can be a fairly confusing system. But really important is that people can go to mass.gov/COVID housing help, or they can call 211. The great thing about 211 is there are operators who can speak many languages. So if you're not even sure where to start, you're not even sure what you're looking for, if you call 211, you will get routed to the correct place. And there's also a lot of great information on this website about the various resources that are available. You'll probably get connected to someone like Regine at Metro Housing Boston, or you'll get connected to someone like Andrea about avoiding an eviction. But it's really important that you go through this resource to get to the right place. There also is local assistance. I want to stress this because I've been working with communities throughout the Commonwealth who immediately said, we can't wait for RAFT. We can't wait for any other programs to get through. We want to put some local assistance into this. So there are many communities that have put together local assistance funds. There is a listing of these local programs on our housing toolbox. Again, this link, you should be able to click it when you get these materials, and you can look up the community that you're in to see if there are any local resources. You could also just contact your local municipality, call your mayor's office or your local community development office, your human resources or human services office. They may know about various options for you. They may be able to pay for housing, but they also may be able to pay for things like childcare or food to free up some of your budget. So please make sure, and you can get both of these things. You can get both the state programs and the local programs at the same time, as long as they're not paying for the same housing costs, because we know people have had a lot of income loss, so that this could be very helpful to you. So very briefly, the federal eviction moratorium, I'm again not going to go too much into this. Andrea will talk about it, but the federal moratorium replaced our state moratorium on October 17th. The big takeaway from our office is that it's not as comprehensive, but it is something. But what it does need is some actions by tenants. You can't just get the protections, you need to take some actions. And so Andrea will go over all of the things that you need to do, but it does cover virtually all rental properties. So that's important to think about. But it doesn't stop the need to pay your rent. So it will protect you from the eviction, but rent is still owed, and it doesn't stop the buildup of that rent. And it does allow for evictions to move forward if it's for reasons other than non-payment of rent. For example, if you are posing a risk to the health and safety of yourself or to others in your property. There's some links to the forms here, to FAQs and the declaration form. Like I said, you need to proactively report that you are eligible for this federal eviction moratorium. And I think the key thing that I want to leave folks with about this is that it's about a clear connection between evictions and the health and safety of our communities. The reason it came from the CDC is because it's about health and safety. So that's what we're trying to do, is protect people by keeping them in their homes. One thing that we actually there was just a press release about today, we've been working on over the last couple of weeks, is an eviction diversion pledge to go along with these other resources. So this is a coalition of housing owners and operators, many of them affordable housing owners, but others as well, that have pledged and promised to follow these 5 criteria. They're going to abide by the CDC eviction moratorium. They will proactively engage with residents to create payment plans. They will support and accept rental assistance payments. Keep in mind that rental assistance is a form of assistance that is protected under fair housing laws. So landlords are supposed to be doing this anyways, but this is just a proactive pledge to do this work. They will promote rent adjustments for families who may be able to pay less through Section 8 or mass rental voucher programs. And they're going to encourage mediation rather than going to eviction first. So there's over 53 property owners. This represents over 57,000 households who are protected by this pledge so far, which we're really excited about. There's a lot of property owners still signing on. And we've actually had some property owners as small as, they own 1 or 2 units. It's critical. So you don't have to be a large property owner. So if you know of property owners in your community that would like to sign this pledge, there is a link where they can do that. There are some other actions that have been happening at the local level. Like I said, I do municipal engagement, so much of my work happens at the local level. Several communities have implemented local eviction orders, either issued by their mayor or their board of health. Several communities, including Boston and Somerville, have issued Housing Stability Notification Act. This requires that at least landlords, when they are moving to evict, would give their tenants all of the various information about the resources and programs that are available to them. There are local housing stability pledges in addition to that statewide one that I was just discussing. Some communities have stood up legal assistance clinics. Chelsea is a good example where they're putting a lot of resources into making sure tenants have as much legal assistance as possible. Many of them are doing increased communication. So some communities are doing mailers to every single tenant in the city or town to make sure that they have all of these resources. And then some are standing up additional resources for property owners. Just because rent isn't getting paid doesn't mean that the landlord doesn't have their obligations. So we are really trying to look at holistic strategies to make sure everyone is made whole. I would be remiss if I didn't say, we're talking about housing concerns during COVID-19, but we had housing concerns long before COVID-19. So I just wanted to make a mention of a couple of things. First of all, the impacts of COVID-19, we've all seen this, are more likely to impact people of color and people with lower incomes. This is for a variety of reasons, but as we are making our recommendations and our solutions, we're really trying to look at particularly vulnerable communities who were vulnerable prior to COVID-19 and are more vulnerable today. Our communities continue to be highly segregated, and this is something we at CHAPA continue to work on through all of our strategies. And because of that, COVID-19 is hitting in segregated communities harder, and the impacts are felt harder. And it's also hitting communities with crowded housing harder. I want to make a note, crowded housing is not density. Density is when there's a lot of units in one area, but everyone has sufficient space for themselves. Crowded housing is when you have people doubling up, when you have more people per apartment than there are bedrooms. It's very hard to socially distance when you don't have space to come home at the end of the day and be on your own. So this is a problem we're going to continue to work on. And related to that, housing production is well behind what's needed, and very few communities are building the bulk of our new housing. The Greater Boston Housing Report Card, which I linked to here, shows that. But if we want to solve our problems of segregation and impacts of COVID-19 and crowded housing, we need to be ramping up our production of affordable housing. So Kate mentioned the state budget, so I won't go into this much. I do want to thank Rep. Lipper-Garabedian for her support on these initiatives. We have an analysis of the state budget on our website, and we also have several amendments that we are supporting, which were also mentioned by Rep. Lipper-Garabedian, specifically around making RAFT more flexible and able to expedite applications. What we want to do is get money into the hands of people who need it, and so removing as many barriers as necessary. We want to support housing consumer education centers so they can build up their capacity and get that money out there. As Regine will tell you, it's been a lot, a deluge of applications. And we also are supporting that home-based amendment that was mentioned that will help people who are facing homelessness to stay housed. I also want to just mention, I won't go into this too much, but things that you can be doing locally. We are also focused on the federal elections and the state budget, but we can have impacts locally. So I encourage everyone who's watching this to, dig into your local data and listen to people with affordability concerns in your community, and start talking with your planners and your elected officials and showing up to public meetings and advocating at the local level, because that's where things get built. That's where resources get into the hands of people who need it. That's where people live. And so if you're not working locally to do affordable housing work, I really encourage you to get engaged. Please feel free to contact me if you'd like to get a local housing advocacy group going in your community. And you're always more than welcome to join our CHAPA committees. So I'm going to hand it over to, I think, Brendan is going to be going next, or I'll hand it back to Rep. Lipper-Garabedian to take us to the next step.
Dana, thank you so much. That was really helpful in terms of framing how challenging this time is for folks, but also reminding us that this is an issue that we had even before COVID-19. COVID-19 is just really exacerbated in ways that we weren't anticipating, but we've known for quite a while, and it's been a topic of conversation for you all in your mission-based organization, as well as policymakers, that we do have a really an insufficient supply of housing in the greater Boston area, and certainly of affordable housing. And I'm really glad that you brought up as well that there are a number of local leaders and municipalities that are, standing up programs and supports for their residents. I see, one of our Malden City councilors here, Amanda Linehan, and a number of Melrose, elected officials as well have signed up, and City Hall representation from Melrose as well. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, and it's actually something I made a note to perhaps add some of that as well to my resource guide and table. So to your point, that was really great, and now we'd love to turn it over to Brendan to talk specifically about the Eviction Diversion Initiative. And thanks so much again for being here.
Thank you. I'm going to look for a thumbs up as well that people can see my screen. Okay. Thank you all for joining tonight or tuning in, and thank you to the representative for assembling us all. It's a really important topic. I'm Brendan Goodwin. I'm the director of the Division of Rental Assistance at DHCD. Our division oversees both state and federal rental assistance programs. So that includes the Massachusetts Rental Voucher Program, Alternative Housing Voucher Program, the Department of Mental Health Rental Subsidy Program, and we also oversee the HCECs, the Housing Consumer Education Centers. In addition to that, we also have the federal Section 8 program that we oversee. We've put out a number of policy flexibilities and regulatory waivers related to voucher programs and rental assistance programs in order to respond to the COVID crisis, streamlining things and just making it generally easier and more flexible for both tenants and landlords, and as well as our administering agencies during this time. So that's that, but that's what my normal job, but I've been doing a lot of work around this eviction diversion initiative. It's been all hands on deck at DHCD, and that is what I am here to talk about tonight. So I'm borrowing from a previously created briefing deck. It's very detailed and long. I'm not going to hit on all of it. I'm going to kind of fly through it, but the representative's office does have it available for those that are interested in seeing more of it and kind of seeing some of the data and the appendices and digging deeper into it. So, okay. The Eviction Diversion Initiative, we also call it EDI, really kicked off with the expiration of the state eviction moratorium on October 17th. This slide here is, for me, it's a fairly overwhelming flow chart showing the different interventions under the EDI from pre-filing all the way to post-eviction. Basically what it's showing is just that we're trying to offer a number of responses at each step along the eviction process through the expansion of existing programs and through the creation of new programs. And we are disseminating all of this information through a pretty comprehensive public information campaign as well. And I'll touch on each of these components as we move forward. So the public information campaign, I think Dana kind of mentioned some of this already, but we've contracted with the Mass 211 call center to be kind of the central point of contact for information and referrals related to COVID housing issues. This is really important because it's just a very simple number. A lot of people are already familiar with it, and you know, it's the best number to refer people to really to start the process of getting assistance. In addition to that, we've also kind of consolidated all of DHCD's guidance and information and education resources related to the EDI and other housing you know, interventions that we're doing under this one website, www.mass.gov/COVID housing help. So again, trying to make it a little bit simpler URL for people to follow and get to easily to access all of the information in one place. And you know, along those lines, our goal is really just to make sure that everyone that needs the assistance, that is experiencing a housing crisis, knows what the resources are and how to access them really. And even if they don't know what the resources are, at least they know, call 211, start the process there, and people will guide you along the way. And especially with, as it relates to upstream resources before eviction, we want to make sure we're able to help as many people as we can before they have to, you know, kind of end up in the court system or in a formal eviction process. Okay, so one of the existing programs that we've expanded quite significantly is the Housing Consumer Education Centers. We've already mentioned that. We call them HCECs. And I know Regine is going to talk more about HCEC and RAF, so I won't steal her thunder on how all these programs work. But there's 9 HCECs throughout the state, and they kind of act as our one-stop resource for tenants, for landlords, homeowners, advocates for information, education, referral resources, and you know, oftentimes financial assistance as well for anyone that's you know, experiencing some kind of a housing issue. Oftentimes they're referred to as our housing emergency rooms. So we've not only increased the staffing for HCECs across the board just to kind of assist with the normal services they provide, but given that there's such a significant increase in volume of people they're serving now, but we've created an additional position called the Special Housing Counselor that at each of the HCECs. So this additional funding funds at least one full-time staff person at each HCEC to act as kind of a navigator of the different components of EDI. So they'll be able to do a little bit deeper case management than HCEC staff are generally able to do, given the amount of people they have to work with and their funding. And they'll be able to kind of help people access the different resources through all the different components of the Eviction Diversion initiative. The HCECs are hiring for these positions right now. We expect in the next few weeks, most every agency should be ramped up with at least their first staff. Some agencies, larger agencies like Regine's agency at Metro, is probably going to have 2 or 3 of these special counselors to assist their clients. The expansion of HCEC represents an increased budget of $2.75 million. It's about a 73% increase over last year's budget. So total HCEC budget this year is $6.5 million. Again, Regine's going to talk more about RAF, but it's another huge expansion that we've been really working hard on to get up and implemented. So I'm going to touch on it quickly. There's a lot of details in here, but the major pieces that everyone should know is that our RAF program has been around for many years. It's been kind of our #1 homelessness prevention program. It stands for Residential Assistance for Families in Transition. Typically, it's been up to a $4,000 benefit for low-income households, and it's been a really flexible resource that they can use for a number of different reasons, whether it's paying rental arrears or security deposits, moving costs, utilities that may be necessary to help them prevent homelessness, essentially. With the Eviction Diversion Initiative, DHCD has expanded the RAF program to a $100 million program. Just last year, it was a $21 million program. So a huge increase to respond to the COVID crisis and the economic recession that we're experiencing. With the expansion of the funding, we've also expanded the benefit that people can receive. So it has now gone from an up to $4,000 benefit to now it is up to $10,000 in assistance that households can receive. For those receiving more than the typical $4,000 benefit, we are requiring applicants to contribute at least 30% of their income towards the ongoing housing costs. And we're asking landlords not to file for eviction for at least 6 months. Or if there's school-age children in the family, we want to make sure that they don't file for eviction before June, basically when school ends. Right now, everyone knows home is school and school is home, and we, don't want to upend either one of those for people. Okay. A new program, I shouldn't say that this is new because there's been community mediation programs throughout the state for a while, but our investment into this and really focusing in on community mediation around housing is new for DHCD under the Eviction Diversion Initiative. We're partnering with the Massachusetts Office of Public Collaboration, and we're investing in kind of a network of qualified mediation services to help tenants and landlords resolve disputes before they need to go to court. So under this program, the HCECs will be able to refer clients to the community mediators. Clients can be referred from a number of sources, but the mediators will also be able to refer kind of back to the HCECs, to the RAFT administering agencies, to kind of tap into those resources as well. And of course, they'll be providing, dispute resolution and mediation services to try and avoid the need for cases to go to eviction court. Okay. This program, since this PowerPoint was created, it's actually changed names. I believe it's, Andrea can probably speak to it better, but it's now being called COVID Eviction Legal Help, CELH initiative or program. But everything it's doing is the same that's on the slide. It is another new program that we are spinning up quickly, and it's a pretty huge program. There's a lot of attorneys being hired, a lot of intake staff and other staff to ensure that income eligible tenants and landlords have sufficient legal representation for both pre-court diversion and kind of throughout any court process that may occur. This is being staffed up right now. If I remember correctly, the numbers are something like 48 new attorneys, 24 like supervising attorneys, a bunch of paralegals, intake staff. It's a pretty huge initiative. It's being staffed up through 6 local legal aid services organizations. And they are currently hiring right now. And we're hoping, in the next month or so that we start to see a lot more action going on with this program. Finally, another program that we're expanding, it's been an existing program, is the Tenancy Preservation Program, or TPP. This program is administered through Mass Housing, but it's a DHCD line item in the budget. It's been around a while as well, serving households with disabilities. They provide case management and negotiation aimed at preserving tenancies and preventing eviction. Under the EDI, we are, putting additional funding towards it and expanding TPP to serve a broader population beyond just beyond disabled households. It also will be serving those that may be EA eligible. EA is our emergency assistance shelter system for homeless families, as well as for frail elders. And then in the unfortunate cases that do actually go through through eviction and potentially, are looking at facing homelessness or end up in shelter, we are also trying to bolster a number of programs that we have available to that. These are our shelter diversion programs and rapid rehousing programs. I think a lot of people may be familiar with the home-based program. It provides up to $10,000 per household for those that are EA eligible families. We're also expanding our Strategic Prevention Initiative, or SPI program. This is a $3,000 benefit. It's available to households who are likely but have not yet been determined eligible for emergency assistance. And finally, we're kind of bringing back our METAR program, which was stood up for natural disasters and hurricanes previously. We're changing one of the acronym letters, I don't know, but now it's the Massachusetts Emergency Transitional Assistance Reserve. We love our acronyms at DHCD, but this will also provide up to $10,000 for households to try and divert them from EA shelter, again, before they're determined eligible for shelter. And then I'll just end with kind of the resources that we're putting into this. I mentioned some of them, but again, HCEC is receiving a boost. RAFT is receiving a huge boost. TPP is now at $3.8 million. The COVID eviction legal help is funded at 12.3. And then we're putting a total of 48.7 towards home-based and our SPI and METAR programs to ensure that we can quickly rehouse anyone that has to go to shelter, or even try and divert them even once more before they end up in shelter. The total investment of $171 million by the DHCD and the Baker-Polito administration. This is $112 million of that is new funding beyond what the regular state budget appropriations were for this year, I guess. We think we're in FY21, but getting there soon. So there, again, the PowerPoint has an appendix with a lot more data and everything. If anyone really wants to dig in, that's available to you. So I won't get into it tonight, but that's all I've got. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Brendan. And I will be making all of the slide decks available to folks who registered. We'll also figure out a way to make them available through my website or if people reach out. So really grateful for the work that each of your different agencies put into developing these resources. And to your point, I think it's a really good analogy to say, the flow chart itself is sort of an analogy for how folks are feeling about this whole process. Many families were not anticipating the level of instability that they're facing right now due to the pandemic. We just weren't it's catching us all off guard. And so it is overwhelming, I think is the word that you use. And I'm really glad that we have the four of you here today to help us unpack a little bit about that and maybe support people who are watching now or later. So with that, I'd love to turn it over to Regine. As Brendan mentioned, you all are doing Herculean work right now to support people in this region of the country, or excuse me, of the state. And so I'd love for you to walk us through a little bit of the different programs that you're helping people navigate.
So much. Earlier, so my name is Regine Crispin. I'm the Housing Consumer Education Center Manager at Metro Housing Boston. I've been there for about 10 years and I've worked in multiple roles where I've done case management, I've worked on the RAFT program, I've also managed the program, and I work with a series of case managers, and a large group of service providers and partners as well. So today I'll focus mainly on what is the HCEC, what exactly are the RAFT and IRMA programs. We in housing, we use a lot of jargon, but I will be, a lot of acronyms, but I will be saying everything to make sure everyone understands it. And then I'll really talk about how to apply, what we can assist with, and how to get in contact with us. Just some basic information to make sure everyone has that information. So I wanted to start with our mission at Metro Housing. We mobilize wide-ranging resources to provide innovative and personalized services that lead families and individuals to housing stability, economic security, and improved quality of life. The Housing Consumer Education Center is like the front door of Metro Housing. Like Brendan had mentioned earlier, there's nine organizations that have a Housing Consumer Education Center across the state. We're also known as the Housing Hub. We have all information from affordable housing to rent and relief programs to how to negotiate information with your property owner. It's a wide range of resources. So someone comes to us because maybe they don't know where to start. They don't know exactly how to apply for a program or what they're eligible for. So they would contact their local housing consumer education center. Best way to reach us is either through email, or you can contact us. We do have case managers able to answer the phones and direct you to the right location. It's a little wordy, but I'll explain it. So the RAF program stands for Residential Assistance for Families in Transition, and the IRMA program stands for Emergency Rent and Mortgage Assistance. The financial assistance program started as a program that would help with up to $4,000 within 12 months. Recently, during this COVID-related crisis right now, the benefit has gone up to $10,000. This is a benefit that is able to help families who are in transition where they're not sure what to do. The eviction moratorium has been lifted and they're not sure how they're going to pay their rent next month. So this program really allows a lot of families to be open to be able to apply for these programs. To be eligible for the program, it's open to all household compositions. So I did mention families, but it's open to all families. So families could be an individual, it could be two parents and no dependents, it could be someone who is pregnant. So it's really open to a lot of different compositions, which really is beneficial because most of the programs before used to be focused only on a particular composition. So now it's open to mainly everyone. We do look at the household income. So the household income is from 0 to 80% area median income. So we are looking at your gross incomes depending if you do have income or not. If you don't have income, there are still other programs that we still try to determine eligibility for. So one of the things I wanted to explain is that the housing consumer education, our goal is to determine what areas can we triage and connect you with. If it's not RAFT, if it's not IRMA, are there other state funded programs? Are there other city local funding programs? So that's our job to really connect you to those benefits. We do get people contacting us and saying they want to apply for a particular program, but our goal is trying to figure out, let's do an intake. Let's find out what are you eligible for? What town do you live in? And see how we can connect you with those areas as well. What can the program be used for? So this is a shorter list of what the program can be used for. So it's rental or mortgage arrears, security deposits, which would include first, last month's rent, utility arrearages, if there's a shutoff notice right now and you're not able to pay your oil, your water, electricity, it's all included. So we do an assessment to find out what exactly we can assist with. And furniture is something that we also assist with as long as it's connected to the list of housing crises that I'll just go over right now. So this list of housing crises, when someone is connecting with us to try to apply for the program, the case manager is trying to determine some information just to find out what could they be eligible for. Specifically for the RAFT and IRMA program, the person who's trying to apply needs to fit one of these criteria here and be able to document it in some capacity. A lot of the information is available on our website. It's available on a couple of the websites that Brendan and Dana mentioned as well, where you can determine what documentation that you're able to have. And maybe if you don't have documentation, there is flexibility during this time on the documentation that is needed. So one of those would be maybe an eviction. Maybe you are starting to receive a letter to go back to court. Maybe it's that you fell behind on your rent during March to June and now you have a job and you still don't know how you're going to pay those arrears. So this might be an example. Doubled up and must leave. That's also a housing term. What that really means is that you're currently homeless. You don't have a place to stay. You're staying at a friend's or family's place and you really can't stay there anymore. And you found a new place, but you don't have the money to move to a new place. So that's really that category. And these are really explained on our website and explained in the application piece as well, in case if you're not sure what area it would fit. Health and safety, it could be a series of things. What we're looking at is what is the situation that's happening right now that's causing a crisis where you would need the additional funding. That's what we're looking at. Is there a crisis because we're all going through a crisis, but is there a crisis specifically in this area where RAFT or IRMA could be used? Or if it's not, maybe it can be used in addition with other city funding, because there are a lot of programs that we're able to combine both of the funding as well. Foreclosure, if you are currently facing foreclosure, sometimes some programs are geared only towards tenants, but this program here is geared towards also homeowners who may not be able to pay their mortgage and is facing some serious foreclosure or maybe mortgage arrears. Severe overcrowding, a little bit self-explanatory. If you are in a place that has multiple people and you really cannot stay there, what we are looking for is we're looking at what's the current situation and is this funding going to help you to move to a better situation or a better solution. Fire, flood, natural disaster, domestic violence if you're fleeing, and utility shut-off notices. So right now there might be some families right now are covered by the winter moratorium, but others are not. So those who are not or may not know that they can be placed on a discount rate or be placed on something that can help them on a payment arrangement, they would first contact the HCC. The HCC would connect to find out what area would best fit. Is it the RAT program? Is it the IRMA program? Is it that we need to partner with other organizations for this person to be able to apply? So this is one of those listings as well. And how to apply. So the best way to apply right now is through our online application. Our online application, we do have the online application in English and Spanish, and we also have other applications that looks very similar to the online application. That's a fillable application in 7 other languages. So if you feel that you want to do the application in another language, you would be able to do that through our website. You would be able to fill it out, and you can either mail it into our office, and we do have some staff working on those applications, or you could be able to contact us through email, which is through the resource line email, and say, I have an application. What is the best secure way that I can put this in? So some key things to know about this application. It's a secure link into an application where you can upload information. So a lot of this time during July and now, we've received over 2,000 applications. I think it's like 4,000. Honestly, we've received so many applications, and what we're really asking is that you're completing the application. You're uploading your ID. This is a secured email. You're uploading information. We no longer need your full social security cards anymore, as long as you're filling out the application. That you're allowing us to know exactly what the situation is, and if it's connected to COVID, why the crisis is happening. So we've received a lot of applications that have been incomplete. So we want to ask everyone out there that when you are filling these applications out, that you're filling out the full application. If you do need any reasonable accommodation, or there's a language assistance that you're looking for, to reach out to the HCEC. And that way we can connect and be sure that we're able to provide you with that assistance that you're looking for as well. And primary points of contact. So I did put in here, again, the resource line, which is the way that you can connect with HCEC, but Metro Housing does more than works on the RAT program and the HCCs. So we do administer rental vouchers, and someone who has a rental voucher with us, whether it's a Section 8, an MRVP, all of these acronyms. If you have a rental voucher with Metro Housing and you are trying to connect with us, maybe you need to change your rent share because there was a change of your income recently, or maybe you need to connect because you're moving and you want to use RAT, but you want to be sure that your program specialist knows about it. The best way to reach us, if you have a voucher with Metro and you have information that you need pertaining to your voucher, then you would contact the gateway at metrohousingboston.org. And if you are trying to contact HCC or apply for the rent and mortgage relief, rental relief program, there's so many different names, sorry, then the best way to reach us is through the resource line contact information. So we have case managers that are responding to emails, they're responding to calls, there's ways to connect with us. And if you've already connected with us and you're looking for updates, the best way to find out an update is to contact the resource line. We will try our best to get as much information out to you as possible, but we are trying to get through as many applications as possible, but we want to be sure that everyone knows how to get in contact with us. And that is my presentation. And let me just stop sharing here.
So much, Regine. That was really helpful. And I'm so reassured that our area of the Commonwealth, just like I'm sure every other area, has a resource like yours to help people. Because again, it is just a very complicated concept to sort of grapple with when there's so many different programs. And to your point, many of them may be complementary and that people may qualify for more than one. So it's helpful to know that there are consumer supports available to them. And I certainly have linked to a number of your organization's web pages on the resource that we developed. So thank you. So I think we'll now turn to Andrea to talk about the legal protections that are existing for folks right now, both pre-eviction proceedings and then during that type of proceeding. So thank you for joining us and look forward to learning more from you as well.
Thank you, Representative, and for everybody for being here. I hastily threw something together, so I'm not going to promise that there's not a random thing in here. I will talk a little bit about the resources, and then I do want to spend a little time talking about, I think, the bad news, which I think is playing a big role in what we're doing right now. So I'm Andrea. There's my contact information if anyone wants to ask questions. I am a legal aid attorney. I've been in legal aid for quite a while in Worcester and in Boston. And now I'm at MLRI, and we do policy, statewide policy, but also legal aid technical support. So this is just some really, really short background information, which I think has already happened, but I realized that some people actually didn't know a lot about the moratorium. So I just put this in here just to say that the moratorium, which went into effect in April and ended, as you heard, in October, really stopped everything, including the pre-eviction notices that prompt a lot of people to move out even before there's a court case. And so in that way, I think it was really important that it did what it needed to do in these vulnerable places that Dana talked about, where there, it's really a lot of overcrowding, a lot of vulnerable people, a lot of undocumented people who are really afraid to interact with the court process. And it also stopped foreclosures and put a forbearance program into place. And I think that's really important to know, because I think that one of the things I'm going to talk about in the bad news part is that we are seeing a lot of foreclosure activity picking up again. So obviously the moratorium ended on October 17th. You saw some of the MAPC numbers that Dana posted. And they, by their own count, it's a conservative estimate as far as how much is needed. And unemployment is going to run out pretty soon. So I think it is a big crisis that we are looking at right now and trying to fix. So I'm going to talk briefly about the CDC action that they took. As you heard, when our state moratorium expired on October 17th, the CDC, which had been in place since September, kind of kicked in. It hadn't really been in effect here. It hadn't been relevant here because our moratorium was stronger, but once ours expired, this became more relevant to us. As you heard, it does require some work on the part of the tenant. And I think if you don't remember anything else I say, and you have a tenant in front of you who is saying, what do I do? I think they should apply for RAFT and they should fill out this declaration if they're able to truthfully, because I think those are two things that may make a difference. And this is the only way I think in which this might help. Our courts, unfortunately, have interpreted this to mean that the physical eviction is prevented. And so the district court actually has taken a different view, which is that the case stops basically in its tracks if the landlord receives a declaration, but the housing court is interpreting it to say that the physical eviction can't happen. So someone may provide the declaration and the case may continue, but at least until December 31st, that person should not be able to be physically removed. I'm going to go through these kind of fast because I will provide these. It's a lot to remember, but I think for most tenants, it's worth taking a look at it. I think you've kind of heard a little bit about this. You have to have had income below $99,000, and you have to be unable to pay because of a loss of income, which includes extraordinary medical debt or bills. You've used your best efforts to obtain government rent assistance, and this is where the RAFT application is really important, both because we really want to push people to applying for RAFT, and definitely the local resources that Dana talked about are really important, because I think there's more of them out there than I've ever seen. But a lot of people don't know about them. So there are other places to look for this resource. I don't think that people have to do everything. You know, we had a debate about what best efforts means. I feel comfortable telling people that if they put in a RAFT application, even if they haven't, you know, gotten that far in it yet, that they have used their efforts to do that. And so they should be able to attest that they did that, and that they are likely to become homeless if they are evicted at this point. And then there is a promise to make payments as much as they can. And this is a little bit tricky. And these criteria are important because you have to sign this. The tenant has to sign this under penalty of perjury, that these things are true. So they should be true. What people should do is to sign this declaration if they can, make a copy for yourself, provide it to your landlord, and then try to keep some proof that you did it. And I think we're going to be finding, you know, we're already seeing this, and I can talk about this later, how this is playing out in court a little bit. It's going to be a bit of a fight in some of these cases. And there's a couple of resources here. This is from a different presentation, but Homes for All is a organizing kind of umbrella group in Massachusetts that does tenant on the ground organizing. And so they're trying to push this message out to as many people as they can to provide the declaration. And here's a slide link to find legal aid for Legal Aid Office, which I didn't know was here, and I made that slide again. The other important things to know about this is that you don't have to provide the proof of this. I think it's good to have it, but I think that it is certainly for people whose cases have advanced through the court and may be close to this physical removal, they shouldn't be waiting to do this until they can get, you know, proof of X that happened. It's helpful to have, probably, if they believe that it might be challenged in court, to have that document and know how to get it, but they don't have to be able to prove that in order to fill it out. And also importantly, and I think Dana said this, but I'm going to say it again, which is that it doesn't have to be COVID related financial hardship. So as she described it really well, it's a public health measure. It's not designed to solely help, you know, people who might have been COVID affected. This is the CDC saying we must stop moving around. And I think we're seeing that play out, where we're in this pretty scary second surge. And we need to do everything we can to keep people from moving around. The guidance say that if you have roommates, each adult needs to try to sign this. Again, you know, this is one of these gray areas where we don't know how hard the hammer might come down on someone. If you can't get everybody to sign it, I still think it's worth putting it in. And I don't think this should be the barrier for people trying to not be removed from their homes. And I think that at any point, if you are in the process of being evicted, this should be able to stop that if it applies. And again, you have to continue paying the rent. You're swearing that you're going to pay as much rent as you can. So you should do that to the extent you can. And there has never been anything that has passed locally, state, or federally that says you don't have to pay. So that obligation has always remained there. And this will end on December 31st, barring anything else that happens there. I know people think that it might be extended. They think that maybe perhaps a new administration might do something different. That all remains to be seen. So the way it looks now is that it's going to be ending. And I think it's absolutely worth people trying. I know that a lot of people are feeling discouraged about the amount of money they owe and just saying, well, I'm just going to move. I think if people can fight to hold on, I have never felt much like there's going to be a lot of help coming as I do now. I do hope. I think this is a national crisis, and I think that there's a lot of work being done nationally to try to get some help. But people should hold on if they can for a lot of reasons. There is a simplified declaration form. So the CDC has its own form. It's quite long and complicated. It's not necessary that you use that version. They do accept other alternative declarations. So I think this is one that was made available on the National Low Income Housing site. It is translated into many, many languages on that website. And it's just, as you can see, a very kind of shorter, simpler version of it. And you just put your signature at the bottom and then you provide it. So if this link helps, if you want to have this printed out, or you can provide this for people in their language, then this is a place you could get that. And the official CDC version is here. We also have information on our website. There's a COVID-19 housing page on masslegalhelp.org, which is the website that we kind of provide for pro se. There's for litigants and for attorneys. Frankly, I use this all the time. And as you see across the top, there's resources here for a number of different topics. And here is also some more information about the CDC on that National Low Income Housing site. I don't know what else I put here. So here's the way you can find your legal aid office. You can go through a series of questions because the geographic areas are a little different depending on whether you're an elder. I believe in your district it would be Greater Boston Legal Services, but there are maybe some crossover with Northeast Legal Aid. And I think I just made this while people were talking, just for people. I think if you're getting constituent calls, or if you're getting calls from tenants who are not sure what's going on, there has been a lot of confusion, and I'll talk about this in a minute, about court. There's notices that are going out. There's some errors that are happening. There's some things that are happening that are a little unclear. So I think they can always call the court and say, do I have a case? When am I supposed to be on? What do I do? Right now, all the court hearings are happening on Zoom. So if people don't have the ability to do that, they should call the court. And I know it's hard to call the court if you don't have a phone. I think this is where, you and the resources that you can provide people, it may be as simple as, can you make a call for someone and say, call the court on their behalf and say, this person needs to know what they can do. I got a call like this yesterday from just a community member. And then if nothing else, if someone is there and they're on the Zoom call, they don't know what to do, and tell them they should ask for a lawyer for the day. There should be a lawyer for the day available. And I'll talk about this when we get to the EDI part, but they should be able to, even in that Zoom room, say, I'd like to speak to the lawyer. There should be a legal services attorney available, sitting in a Zoom room somewhere, waiting for people to be referred over. And again, just apply for RAFT, do the CDC declaration if they can, and hope that that will stop the eviction to the extent that it might. So I'm just gonna say a little bit more about everything. And I just wanna say that all of these folks have been working really, really hard over the last month to kind of get these things going. And I think that these are really heroic efforts. They're really, as you saw, just from Brendan's flow chart alone, there's like a lot of brain power that's going into this right now. I think, so I'm here to deliver some bad news. I just think that it's not ready. I think that there's a lot of this that's not ready. The moratorium expired. I think a lot of people were surprised that the governor would let it expire at this point before all these things were prepared. I think there's a lot of really excellent resources and ideas in these plans, but I worry about what kind of damage is going to be done in the meantime until we can really make them ready and make them real. Just the backdrop on court, just to kind of follow up on what Dana was talking about as far as the communities where, where COVID is hitting the hardest. And they are the communities where there was a very urgent housing crisis before COVID hit. And we really had been, we were taught with Chapa and a lot of people spending a lot of time talking about what to do about this, both, starting with production and going all the way to EA. The system is really being squeezed on all fronts. And it was against that backdrop that COVID happens. And it's no coincidence that it's those neighborhoods like Chelsea, like Lynn and Fall River that are seeing just astronomically high rates of infection. And it is where they are the frontline workers. They've never been able to stop going to work, and there is a lot of doubling up. And I think there's new data from the administration that shows that overcrowding really is, like, household spread is the main driver, certainly, of this second wave. And so it feels hard, I think, for all of us to continue this lockdown mentality, but it's just more urgent than ever that we don't have people moving around more than we need to, especially now that kids are back in school, especially now that the weather's getting colder. We can't be outside much. And I think this is where the alarm is really coming from for a lot of us. So the kind of backdrop of court is that most tenants who are being evicted are low income. Many of the over 90% have no attorneys to represent them. And by contrast, I think about 75 or 80% of landlords have attorneys. Many tenants don't speak English. Many of them have pretty significant disabilities, some of them cognitive disabilities that make it impossible for them to kind of, know what's even happening, much less assert some legal rights. on top of the housing crisis we had an eviction crisis. I think that the housing crisis leads to an eviction crisis, which means that there are people who are in court because they are working 2 jobs and can't afford their rent. And I think as we've heard, it's going on much longer than we expected. And I think that the financial crisis it remains to be seen kind of what we can do about this, but it's not a good situation, and it doesn't seem to be getting better yet. I think it's worth saying that evictions lead to overcrowding. People either get evicted or they are fearing eviction. They feel like, or they get the notice and they say, there's nothing I can do. I know I'm not working yet. I can't possibly pay this back. I'm just going to move. And I think, some people will go for the shelter. Some people are going to go to grandma's house or to their aunt's house or their friend's house and say, how long can I stay here? And this is exactly what we need to avoid right now. Summary process case. Summary process is the word for eviction cases. It's the legal term. They move very quickly. So I think, most of them happen now, I think, in housing court. They can also be filed in district court. Sorry. I have active singers.
My son is trying to FaceTime me, during this conversation. So we're all familiar with the joys of doing this from home. So
yes, it's wonderful. Hi. So they move very quickly, and I think so. I'm going to focus on housing court mostly. I think that certainly the legal resources are centered on housing court, right, Brendan? They're not in district court. I think they're only in housing court. And so the way that's going to look is, as Brendan said, there's going to be, I think, about 90 or so. There's going to be a combination of attorneys and some supervising attorneys and paralegals. And I believe, I'm actually using Brendan's spreadsheet or his PowerPoint from earlier, that they are going to be available, I think, by certain types of referral. I think the idea is to kind of filter things in through 2-on-1. To help people and both advise and to represent people in the mediation stage of an eviction case, in court, in motions and in trials. And they should also be able to be, referred when there is a pre-court and there's some sort of pre-court diversion that's happening. In the community mediations, which would be happening pre-court, theoretically, they can be sent over to legal aid for some sort of a referral or an assessment of a case. And so that's the idea. The hiring is, happening frantically, but the cases are also happening. So there's just a lot going on. I'm not sure how quickly we can get like 60 attorneys kind of hired and trained in a kind of complicated area of law and kind of really adequately supervised so that we feel good that people's rights are not, being compromised in the meantime. So that's one of the concerns, just a very straight logistical concern that I know that some of the regionals are also experiencing. I think just as a concept, just of how quickly this all happened, it doesn't really seem fair that the courts, the raft administrators are being asked to kind of carry the burden on this entirely. It's the expression about building the plane while it's flying. The courts, once the moratorium lifted, they said, we're going to do the pending cases first. And so those have really started. They're happening. I saw last week there's about 100 and something motions for execution, which is the last step of getting the physical move out. And that was just in the Western Mass area alone. Those were from pending cases. We've seen the court issue a couple of executions without scheduling a hearing, just based on errors. They're supposed to schedule another hearing, but when the landlord requested it, they said, okay, here's your execution. So we've had to go on motions to try to stop the move out, which is just really distressing. And I think just trying to, we're meeting weekly just to understand what's new about the process this week, because it's quite confusing. And then there's Zoom on top of that, which I don't even know if I have to describe what's hard about doing hearings in Zoom, but people have been put into breakout rooms with the wrong parties and all kinds of hard things like that. I also think that, there's a lot of concern about whether ultimately this is going to be enough. You saw the numbers, and, $100 million is absolutely a huge investment, and we're hoping to get more out of the budget, but it's not going to do, ultimately, it's not the bigger picture fix that we're going to need. And I think, Brendan mentioned METAR, which was set up for a natural disaster, and that was one that had kind of come to us because the hurricane happened in Puerto Rico and people were coming here. this is a natural disaster that is happening in Massachusetts. And, when I look at the plans, I think it's a very, very, very critical backstop to what is happening. But without the resources on the front end, we're kind of asking people to get sued and then like fill out some paperwork and hope that your landlord is going to agree to work with you. And I think this is what's difficult about this, is that everyone's hands are tied. I think that the raft administrators in DHCD and some of the court staff have the best of intentions to try to negotiate something. But at the end of the day, if the landlord says, I really don't want to have a tenant right now, it feels too risky, they can get their eviction. And I think we're going to see a lot of these things happen. So I'm going to stop there and with the bad news, but I hope that we will be able to work together with the representative and others in the State House.
Thank you, Andrea. And I am on a roll call now that I somehow missed, so I will have to mute myself in a minute, perhaps. I think that we've done a really good job getting through most of the questions that were asked by registrants. The one that I wondered if anyone wanted to speak to a little bit is just what you've seen in terms of municipalities leading on this effort, this focus, including concerns about foreclosed units and how maybe municipalities can step in to sort of prevent landlords from scooping up those units, but instead trying to, protect tenants and lower income households. And if anybody wanted to speak to that briefly, that would be great.
I'll start just because I have a local focus. So I think I mentioned some of the things that are happening at the local levels. A lot of communities, municipalities have their own CARES Act funds, their own COVID relief funds. And they also have, depending on the community, they have additional home funds and CDBG funds. They may have at their disposal affordable housing trust funds or CPA funds. Again, the alphabet soup, Regine, is reminding me to say what all of those mean, Community Preservation Act funds. So we are seeing a lot of municipalities dedicating a lot of those resources to housing right now. As far as foreclosed properties getting scooped up, there definitely could be a program that could be developed at the local level to use some of those funds to go in and purchase properties or to stabilize properties. You could do direct homeowner assistance, foreclosure prevention programs, or you could be working with a nonprofit to help them to purchase the properties. And then hopefully either stabilize the homeowner or stabilize the tenants who might be in those properties. So there's a few good examples throughout the Commonwealth. I'd be happy to connect with people and put you in touch with those examples. And then I do think the communities that are doing really broad outreach and communication, like I said, it's not an easy undertaking to email or to do a mailing to every single property owner, every single tenant in a community. But there's so much information out there that people are not receiving. And so, for properties that might be facing foreclosure, making sure that property owners have spoken to their bank, their lender, and seen if there was any ability to defer their payments. There's the ability to add your payments onto the end of the loan. There is RAFT, which can be used for mortgage as well. It's not just for tenants, although we often think of it that way. So there are a lot of properties to help, or programs to help tenants or landlords and owners before they get into foreclosure, and then if they were to get into foreclosure, resources that could assist them. So I hope that's, and I'm happy to connect you with any specific communities that are doing this kind of work.
Thanks, Dana, and thank you for the question. So I think we'll probably wrap it up now. We've once again gone over the allotted time. These community conversations, it's only my second one, but it has proven to be just as robust as the first, and just so thoughtful and comprehensive from each of the four of my guests. I really am grateful for your time and the thought you put into this. Andrea, I wish I had your PowerPoint skills to pull something like that together on the fly. I am not able to do that myself. So kudos to you and to all the other three of you. Your decks were fantastic, and I certainly will circulate them and think about other ways to get them out to my communities and more broadly. The housing situation, I remember growing up, you would have, in maybe first or second grade, there was sort of, what are the three things you need to survive? And it was shelter, clothing, and food. And so shelter is a fundamental necessity for people. And it's something that was ingrained in me at a very young age. And it in of itself is just something that we're struggling with even before this pandemic. But the pandemic has reinforced that housing is not only an end in of itself, but it's a means to an end in terms of combating COVID-19. As all of you have noted, housing instability and leading people to move in with others or be insecure and need to seek shelter elsewhere really exacerbates the health challenges that we're facing with an incredibly contagious virus. So getting it under control is absolutely necessary for keeping the virus under control. And we're certainly seeing concerning rates as we're entering what seems to be clearly a second big, a rise in numbers and related concerns. So I share each of you I know are deeply concerned about this, are concerned about the people that we're talking about needing to access these resources and programs and the degree to which they're insufficient in some ways probably to meet the demand and the need. One thing that was mentioned in passing that I remain hopeful about is the potential for additional federal leadership and investment in states and the programs that each of your organizations is leading on. And I think in a post-election world, even without a change administration, with some of that, elections as having just come out of one myself, can lead people to be more circumspect and unsure about where to go next. But now that we're through that, I'm really hopeful that Congress can get through a package of relief that will come to us quickly and to come to each of you to support the people and the families in our communities who we care deeply about and who are, very concerned right now. So I'm really grateful for the time that each of you took to share this information. I look forward to working with each of you and learning more from you as I continue in this role. And of course, if folks watching tonight or later on have questions, they can reach out to my office as well as yours. So again, thank you. It was really wonderful to be with you all. And please, everybody, be well and stay safe.